Good Tavach, this is Gemara Pesachim Daf Pehi. Tonight's year should be a special shidduch for Miriam Abbas Esther Sheindel. She should have a shidduch b'karoiv. Of course, as well are Chaylim, Chaymislik Moshe ben Esther Rezel, Yudah Meir ben Ikir, Men ben Vigel, Chaim ben Sarah, Shalom Siv ben Rezel, Sarah Bas Kenendi Basin, Chaysar Yisrael ben Mendele, Zeverdin Shalei, Shalom Bas Navi, Shafiq Shulchan Faldavi Nitriva, Shmuel ben Tila, Dinah ben Chan Rezel, Milka Chaya Bas Mina, Livracha Bas Tavia Musa, Adina Edel Bas Shina Mindol, Simcha Tevi Bas Ben Avigail Pesha. Stephen Fega, Dvaira, Michael, Stephen Nasile, Huva, Vesay Sharchli, Israel, Chashiva, Shidduch for Atalea, Bas Ita. And first of all, a big thank you to all those that reached out and tried to participate in spreading this year further. We're all trying to spread Torah. Tremendous chus that I have to learn with all of you. And I hope that Amir Tashem, we could continue spreading to many, many more people. Let's pick it up on Pei Dalit Amid Beis as we're up to the second to last daf in the seventh parak. We are on the last line of the medium-sized line. Tanya Ka'arba Minayu. There's a raya to four of them. Four of whom? This entire Amid is that which actually began way back on Pei Dalit Amid Aleph at the Mishnah. We had no less than 8 different answers how we were able to differentiate. The Gemara asked on the bottom of Dalit Amid Aleph, "My beinayu," what was the difference between the two different ways of explaining whether it was that it was kosher, whether it was ra'ui la'achila? Those were the two different explanations on Pei Dalit Amid Aleph, and the Bryce says that Etzlo Sisru by Rabbi Omer, and therefore we said Kol Ra'yu La'achila. That's when you're allowed to break the bone. And the other opinion said the Tanakama said that it's kosher. Again, we're discussing when you're allowed to break the bone, and the discussion is whether it's a carbon that has to be Ra'yu La'achila or whether a carbon that has to be kosher. So the entire Amud we had 8 different answers. Says the Gemara now Tani Karba Minayu. The Tani learned to the Raisa Rabbi Omer the first one line. You have to eat it in your one house. You cannot break a bone. Remember, learn out. It's only if it's kosher. That is raya to one shita. If there was a moment in time that the carbon was kosher and it became possible, the time of eating it, that is raya number 2. Raya number 3. Opinion number 3. If there's a amount to eat it, if there's not that a quantity, and number 4 is I'm sorry, this is number 3. One more time. The first one was that was number 1. Number 2 was was number 2. And number 3 is what we're having right now, which Gemara doesn't really speak out 100%. It's referring to the zana of the tail, which is not royal mizbeach. It's excluding that. And lastly, number 4, but earlier there's no problem of shvir sa'atzem. And that is the conclusion to the raya to the 4 opinions that we had. Says the Gemara Itmar, starting a new discussion. We know that kazayis is the minimum quantity for every person to register and subsequently eat of the carbon Pesach. Says the Bryce, if we have a limb that does not have a kazayis in one area on the bone, but it has a kazayis in a different place. So now we have a machlekes Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan Amar, says Rav Yochanan, Yeshu Misham Shiras Atzem. It says Rav Yochanan, it has the din of breaking the bone. Says Reish Lakish, that what? Ein by Misham Shiras Atzem. So machlekes Reish Lakish says there's no problem breaking the bone if there's not the quantity in one area. This bone has a kazayis, but there's a half a zayis in one area and a half a zayis in another area. That is the question, but has a kazayis in another area. I'm sorry, it doesn't have a kazayis in the area that you're breaking it, but a different part of the bone has a kazayis. Is that included in the halacha breaking the bone? Rav Yochanan says yes. Reish Lakish says no. Eisvei asked the Gemara a question on Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. It says in the Torah, Echad etzim yishla kazayis basar. So Rav Yochanan learns the pasuk to teach us whether it has a kazayis v'echad etzim shinalav kazayis basar. Now Rav Yochanan Yochanan explains, "My yin love kazayis basar." What does it mean? It doesn't have a kazayis. Eli medina love kazayis basar klal. Are you going to tell me it doesn't have a kazayis at all? Am I yishva shishviyas etzem? If it doesn't have a kazayis, then there's no problem breaking it. So elalav, what must the brayse mean? Achi kabar echad etzem sheyish love kazayis basar b'makim zeh. Whether it has a kazayis in one area, v'echad sheyin love kazayis basar b'makim zeh, it doesn't have one area, but v'yish love kazayis b'makim acher, then it is included in shviyas etzem. Question on Reish Lakish, Kashal Reish Lakish, because clearly we see this brisa. Even if it doesn't have the quantity in this area, if it has exercise in this area, then that's good enough to be included in the Isser. Amar Le, Reish Lakish responds as we move along. Loi says Reish Lakish. This is what the brisa means. Echad etzem sheishlav k'zayis basar mi bachotz. Echad etzem sheishlav k'zayis basar mi bachotz. But what does it have? Yishlav k'zayis basar mi b'fnim in the marrow. Then the halacha is b'makom shvir in the place you're going to break it. Then it's going to be included in the insert to break. So teaching is a new chiddush, says Reish Lakish. Not that if it doesn't have k'zayis in one area, k'zayis in the other area, that suffices. No, says Reish Lakish does have a k'zayis in the area that you're breaking it, but it suffices if it's inside the marrow. Vatanya, don't get confused. It's not a question, as Rashi in the last line says. Vatanya is a raya. Vatanya, I'll bring you a proof. You're not allowed to break a bone. Whether the bone has marrow, whether it does not have a marrow. What do we do with the pasuk that says that you have to eat the flesh? Fundamental. Which part of the flesh? But basar shall gabe eats him, or this is something that we had the past few days. What's it referring to? That you could eat, you have to eat flesh around the bone, or you have to eat the flesh in the bone. But the Torah teaches so on one hand it says you have to eat the flesh. We're not sure. Is that exterior flesh? Is that also the marrow? On the other hand it says you can't break the bone. So it's telling me what? It's referring to a bone without marrow. That's what you can't break. But we think maybe a bone that has marrow, crack it open and eat out the marrow. And the marrow is included in the halacha of eating of the Karban Pesach. You're going to ask me what? Break the bone. It's not a question to say that you're breaking the bone, because I say of eating the Karban Pesach pushes away the loisa say of breaking the bone. That's what I would have thought. But then, says the Torah, again, where are we holding right now? Right now, the Torah taught us eat flesh. We don't know, is that exterior flesh also mayach flesh? Interior marrow flesh. Says the Gemara, you know what I'll tell you? It includes the marrow. How do you get it? You crack it open. Crack it open! You're not allowed to crack it open. Explains the Gemara, yes you are. Asay of eating the flesh is doichaloisa asay of cracking open bone. But then comes along the Torah, kisheo oimer, but then when the pasuk says, ve'etzem loisish rubai, don't break the bone. Pesach Sheni. Why did the pasuk have to repeat this by Pesach Sheni? It didn't have to say don't break by Pesach Sheni. Why not? Shekvar Nemer already taught us b'chol chukas haPesach yasa asai. You have to do the Karban Sheni, Pesach Sheni, like the Pesach Rishon. So why did the Torah have to go out of its way to say a second time don't break the bone of the Pesach Sheni? This comes to teach us the extra pasuk. Teach me don't break the bone. Whether it has marrow, doesn't have marrow, it is included and you are not allowed to break that bone. So Reish Lakish, in defense to his opinion that says, if you have a bone with does not have a kizayis of meat at the area you're breaking it, but has kizayis at a different area, is not a problem, defends this brisa by saying when this brisa says it is a problem, that was referring to the marrow, that has interior flesh, that has marrow at the point you're breaking it, that is yes an issue. And within this discussion we learned fundamentally how we know that you're not allowed to break it open. Why not? I say because the Torah wrote a second time, do not break it by Pesach Sheni, which comes to hone in and add on that you're not allowed to break it even to get out the marrow. Meisvei says the Gemara. A second question, Reish Lakish. Aver shiat mixasai. We have a limb, and we should pay attention because this is going to be the next Mishnah coming up. We have a limb, that part of the limb leaves Yerushalayim. What do? You cut off the flesh until the part that reaches the bone. And you peel it off until you reach the joint. And then you snap it. Says the Gemara, if you're going to tell me like you reach Lakish hold, doesn't have a Concise over here, but has a Concise flesh somewhere else, you reach Lakish hold in this case, there's no problem because there's no Concise in one area. So why are you peeling off the meat until you reach there? Says Rav Yechon to Reish Lakish, I don't get it. Take off a little bit. What? You take off a little bit of flesh, it's not going to be Concise. Then minitbere. According to you, Reish Lakish is no longer an issur to break it. So why does Bryce say, oh fancy? You got to peel off the flesh all the way to the bottom. When you get to the joint, then you crack it off. I don't get it. Think of one little bit of flesh. It's less than a Concise. Once it's less than Concise, you're allowed to break it according to you, Reish Lakish. Abaye Amar, the first teretz Misham Paka. We're afraid that it's going to crack. Ravina Amar Bekoilis. Ravina says, no, we're talking about the thigh bone. Therefore, it has marrow running down, it has the membrane running down the whole thing, the whole bone, and therefore technical reasons why you would not be able to do that. That concludes the discussion. Rav Yochanan that says not having meat in one area still is included in the issur to break it. Reish Lakish says there's no issur to break it. Two questions on Reish Lakish, two defenses of Reish Lakish. Says the Gemara smack in the middle, Tanan Hasa. We learned a special halacha. If a kohen has a thought of pigel, or if the flesh is left over, the halacha is that when you touch that carbon, your hands become tummy. Even though generally the rules of tumah, of course, are that when one part of your body becomes tummy, your entire body becomes tummy. Here, this breaks the rules. Here, there's a special part of tumah, of a sheni la tumah, that the carbon is going to be a rishon. The kohen that touches the carbon, his hands become tummy. Why? Because of pigel. What's pigel? Pigel is when the kohen has a thought that I'm going to eat this outside the prescribed time. So what's the problem? Let's let the Gemara develop itself. Ravuna, Rav Chisda, Chad Amar, you know why? Nichshad kahuna. Chad Amar, v'nei atzlei kahuna. Says the Gemara, one reason is because of chshad kuna. What's the problem with chshad kuna? We're afraid that the kohen's going to have intent to specifically eat it out to this man. Why? Because he got into some beef. He got into a fight with the person bringing the carbon. So he thinks, I'm going to get this guy. So what does he do? He thinks that the carbon should be after the prescribed time. Afterwards, he tells the bailim, your carbon's tamei. I had the wrong thought. So if he did it on purpose, he has to reimburse the bailim. He has to reimburse the owner. So he's not going to get anything. But if he does it b'shaygig, if he says to my mom, I'm so sorry, by accident, I thought to have it eat at the wrong time, the lach is the carbon is no good, but the kohen does not have to reimburse the owner. So we're afraid kohanim are going to use this as an evil sadistic tool to get back at their enemies. Therefore, what do we say? Therefore, we say that the kohen's hands should become tamei. So now the kohen is going to have a deterrent. He doesn't, once his hands become tamei, he has to go put them in the mikvah. He has to go make them tar, and he's in the middle of eating all his karbanos. So we're hoping that deterrent will stop him from messing up the carbon. Let's see the Gemara. Mar masni a pigel, mar masni a noiser. Mar de masni a pigel on the thought, like we just explained. Like we just said, we suspect the kohen, we don't want them messing people up. Mar de masni a noiser. We don't want kohanim to be lazy. No big deal. I'll eat it tomorrow. I don't have to finish up the eating. That's a problem. It's going to create nicer. So we say that if you touch the carbon, your hand, if once it becomes nicer, your hands become tamei, to prevent the kohen from allowing it to become tamei. Says the Gemara to conclude this machlekes Rav Yuna and Rav Chisda, man masni kizayis, man masni kabeya. One learned that the shear is a kizayis, one learned the shear is a beya. Man the masni kizayis ki isura, just like the isra of the flesh is a shear of a kizayis. Man masni beya, kitamasa, like the lachas of tuma, always go by a kizayis. Says the Gemara Yibailu, let me ask you the following question. Yoytze gazraban and tuma ilah. You just told me there's a new gazira, a new type of tuma on the yadayim, on the hands of sheni la tuma. If there's either a thought of pigel or a thought of noiser. Says the Gemara, what about yaitze? What if you take the carbon outside of its boundaries? Does it also become tamei midrabanan or not? Says the Gemara, me amrina noiser gazra toma. Why? Das latzulebe. They're going to get lazy. Aval yaitze lafuki biyadayim loymafkle. That's too far. We don't suspect the kohen is going to go purposely bring it out. Maybe we don't suspect that. Biyadayim loy gazu birabanan. Thomas they didn't make gzera. Or maybe the gzera applies in all cases. Tashma says the Gemara, if that limb part of it goes out of the walls, you got to cut off until it reaches the bone, and peel off till the joint. Says the Gemara, I'll bring you a proof now. If you're going to tell me that Chazal created a toma? What does it help to cut off the flesh? Right now we think that this little area, you have a bone, and part of it comes out of the wall. So this area that passed by the wall, this flesh is messed up. So that flesh you have to cut off. Says Gemara, 1 second. If they were geyser toma, I mean, just like this part becomes tama, the whole thing becomes tama because it's all connected. So what does it help to cut off that part of the flesh? It answers the Gemara. Thomas Starmi. What? So the Gemara answers, you know why it helps? Because the Tama we're discussing is an internal Tama, and that type of Tama is not Metame. Says the Gemara, really? Ravina holds that the food is not really connected. It's as if it's separate pieces. So according to Ravina, it's going to infect each other because it's like two different pieces. It's not hidden Tama. It's not Tama Starim. Therefore, once one part becomes Tama, the other part will come Tame. Says the Gemara, Kanagabadadi, become a Tame. So if it's touching each other, it's going to give off Tama. Elaman Namasnik Zayis, the last bay. Zayis Man Namasnik Gabeya, the last bay Gabeya. Okay, a bit of a Kabbalah answer maybe. That each Mandamar is going to learn that the shear is, according to them, less than Zayis, less than a Beya. Tashima says the Gemara. You're carrying your Pesach meat from one group to another group. You did the wrong thing. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to carry it from one group to the next. Yet, tahar, it's tahar. My love, says the Gemara, tahar, it's tahar, but it's aser. Why is it aser? Because you went from one group to the next. Similar to leaving the mechitza dami. So what do we see? And it's possible. And yet, so what do we see? Even though you moved it from one group to the next, which you're not allowed to, it says it's tar. The Gemara thinks this is equatable to leaving Lubechitza, leaving Yerushalayim. Yet it says it's tar. Amalei goes Rabbanan Tama. So we see there's no din of Tama because we see clearly it's tar. Says Marlai, tar mutter. Really, it's mutter even. It's not the same as leaving the walls of Yerushalayim. V'loi misal doesn't become Tame. Says the Gemara, 1 second. So you're telling me that carrying it from one group to the next is not going to make it Tame because it's mutter. It's no big deal. Says Mara, 1 second. But Ketani Sefer, the Sefer says, it says you're even allowed. Fine, this big is ice. It's smaller than the shear. That's why. And therefore, let's make a beya. Therefore, it's not Tame. That's not a question. So now we're rechanging the whole story. The Gemara had a question all the way up top over here. Is there din Rabbanan Tama when the carbon leaves the walls? The Gemara says that is not the question. My time, why not? B'nei Chabura's reason aim to be very galakri is very careful. Not about the carbon pesach. All other carbonos. What's that halacha? They make a din of Tama if it left the walls of Yerushalayim, and on that the Gemara says, Teiku, no answer. Okay, let's continue. Last 3 words of Peham and Aleph. Umoitzi basar Pesach. Now, if you take out the flesh of the carbon Pesach, as we turn the law over to says the Gemara, mechabur lechabura minayin. How do we know that you're not allowed to bring the flesh from one chabura to the next? The Tanya learned in a brayso loisoisi min abayis min abasar chutza. You should not take the flesh outside. That's only from one house to the next. How do we know within one house, in your dining room, your living room, in one house, you have 2 different groups of people eating? How do you know you're not allowed to go from one to the next? You're not even allowed to leave your table to go to another group. Amar Avami, Hamoitzi Basar Bezach Mechabur Lechabura Einai Chayiv Ad Shianiach. A fascinating halacha. You take your bas or your flesh from one group to the next group. There's no Isser Daraisa, there's no Chiv until you put the meat down on the table. Meat down on the table? What does that have to do with anything? It says Gemara, you know why? Because by over here it calls it Hamaitzi. You took it out. Shabbos, just like Shabbos, my Shabbos, David Akira, Hanacha, remembrance of the Shabbos old days. Till you did an Akira, you uprooted it, Hanacha, you placed it down. Avachanami, David Akira, Hanacha, till you put it down, you're not going to be over moving it from one group to the next. They were carrying it on stakes. The first ones that left the walls, Azara of the Azara, and the latter ones, they're in the middle, half is out and half is in. What does the Brisa say? Begadim, their clothing becomes tamim. Says the Gemara, but it didn't rest. If you're telling me a yisoid, you're telling me an idea that it only works if you put it down. Here we see he didn't put it down. Says Marhu Maislav Mafar Club and Igrarim, he didn't put it down. They were dragging it along the floor. Such as a fascinating din that we see from the word that it's called Aitzah, that has dinim of Aitzah. You have to actually put it down in order to be over moving the Karban Pesach from one group to the next. Says the Mishnah, Aver, this is what we have been quoting on the entire Amud Aleph. Aver sheyatza miksasai, part of the limb goes out. You cut it till it reaches the bone. And you have to peel off the flesh and then you crack it off. That's why the Karban Pesach. By your regular karbanos, boom, cleaver, cut it in half. Why not? No problem breaking the bone. From the threshold and inward has a din of inward. What's it's referring to? It's referring to the walls of the base of the Yushalayim, the gates over there. So the gates open, there was a thickness of the wall, says the Mishnah. From the threshold and inward is inward, from the threshold outward is outward. The windows and the thickness of the wall has a din of inside like Yerushalayim. Says the Gemara Amar Rav Yehuda Merav. This halacha of splitting people up, of having to be in the same area, says Rav Yehuda Merav, is the same din with regard to tefillah. Very interesting over here that Rashi learns this is a din of tefillah b'tzibur. Tosfos seems to take issue with this Rashi, but anyways, let's see. The Gemara says the same halacha with regard to tefillah could split each other up if you're in the wrong room. Nothing can separate us to our Father in heaven. God knows that you're all davening together, even if you're in a separate room, it's going to be okay. This has been very negay over the months of Corona. We've, I think, mentioned these halachas, that as long as you could see the other person, even if he is in another room, that we do paskin, that does suffice to combine in a minyan. Says the Gemara, let's analyze the Mishnah. And with this, we're going to conclude. Hagufa kasha. You told me for the threshold and inside is inside. What's the actual threshold? Kilachotz. What does the end of the Mishnah say? Steer on the Mishnah. A steer in implications. Like kasha can be shari azara. Kan b'shari Yushalayim. Ta'amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzim ne'emar l'niskatchu shari Yushalayim. The gates of Yushalayim were not kadosh. So when it comes to the gates of Yushalayim, that's when it's not going to be an issue. Which we've learned, the Mitzrayim have to be sent all the way outside of all three camps of Klal Yisrael. But they would be all the way outside there, and they wanted to shield themselves, so they would go next to the wall. And that's the reason why the walls of Yushalayim are not niskadesh. They could shield themselves from the sun. Shield themselves some level from the rain. And Sharnikanor, that even though that was inside, that wasn't in the Shari Yishalayim, that was in the Shari Azara, still it was not in this Kadesh. Why? The Mitzrayim would stand there and they would put the thumb in when they had to do the appropriate Zrika is for the Mitzayra. Therefore, all the walls of the Shari of the Azara were, yes, sanctified. They had Kedusha, they were in this Kadesh, aside for the Sharnikanar. We'll pick up from the two dots tomorrow.